Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, February 14th, 2021. Happy Valentine's Day. Today we're going to be talking about the United States Senate and why it, more often than not, benefits the GOP more than the Democratic Party when looking at the election results, historical election control in the United States Senate. Ultimately, the Democratic Party does come up on the shorter end of the stick when we're looking at the Senate results. And 2020 was honestly a good year for Democrats considering they were able to win a Democratic trifecta. But one cannot understate the Republicans' ability to win the Senate control for the past 6 years and how they almost came in control in the United States Senate elections despite losing the popular vote by 3 percentage points without the addition of New York and California. Very populous states with a very large portion of the Democratic vote share, not even on the ballot, and Democrats still were able to win the popular vote in the Senate elections. We're going to be taking a look at the historical Senate changes over time. And one thing that we do need to recognize is that the reason why the Democratic Party was able to win this majority was because of conservative state Democrats. Jon Tester from Montana, Joe Manchin from West Virginia. Some would argue Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona after the 2020 election result. I'd say Arizona is purple more than anything, but still has a Republican history. But taking a look at where the Democratic Party had Senate control before, a lot of it was in conservative states. They were in Democratic states. That was because these incumbents were popular but ousted in 2014, 2016, 2018, and in 2020 with the case of Doug Jones in Alabama. But ultimately, the Democratic Party was able to win control. And honestly, this probably would have been very difficult for the Democrats to win control had they not done it in 2020. They would have had no ability to govern the way that they are doing right now. Joe Manchin actually wouldn't have as much power, but I didn't mean to say his name. Joe Biden would have been throttled at every single step, including, going through cabinet picks. Pretty much everything that needed to be done by the Democratic Party would not have happened had the Republicans retained control. And fortunately for the Democratic Party, they won control. But had they not done it, we probably would have seen a period of 5 to 10 years where the Republican Party would have maintained control of the Senate just because the Senate map is so lopsided in favor of the Republican Party. And I want to actually take a look at the 2020 presidential results and apply that to a Senate map. Keep this in mind when we take a look at the new map that we're going to be discussing. What we're looking at is a Joe Biden victory of 306 electoral votes. That's 57% of the electoral representation, and he won the popular vote by 4.5%. Despite all of that, the Senate map brings us to a 50-50 tie. And I know what you're thinking, maybe because it's a 50-50 tie, this proves that the system is working. No. Keep the context in mind. Joe Biden won the popular vote by 4.5%. He flipped 5 battleground states from 2016, and the most the Democrats could do, despite winning 57% of the electoral vote, was get 50-50. And this isn't the map with 50-50. This is the map based off the presidential election results. And I want to take a little trip through history from 2008 to 2012 to 2016 to 2020 and highlight which political party benefits the most from the Senate map as we start to go through. Then we're going to take a little bit closer look at history, take a look at how the Senate map went from the Democrats last time they were in control to now, the first time they've been in control since 2014, taking a look at the drastic difference where the Democrats have had support. 2 Republicans in Arizona versus 2 Democrats in Arizona, 2 Republicans in Georgia versus 2 Democrats in Georgia, 2 Democrats in Montana versus 1 Democrat in Montana. Looking at the Senate map previously, the Democrats had a very broad coalition ranging from very conservative states to very liberal states. Now it's starting to be condensed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the system is working, because a lot of effort went into Joe Biden's election victory, and they still were only able to get 50 Senate seats. But let's take a look. Let's go through history and talk about why the Republican Party is still benefiting, despite the Democratic Party in the majority. Why they have come so close and why it's so easy for them to maintain control. So let's take a look. I originally had the swing state characterization. We're probably not going to use it for the sake of this video. I wanted to originally, but I've decided against it considering that it would probably just waste time. But this swing state map was just going to be highlighting the states that were decided by less than 10%. But instead of doing that, let's take a little trip through history to the 2008 presidential election. Let's apply all of the states Barack Obama won into the Democratic column and all of the states that John McCain won into the Republican column. Of course, John McCain won his home state of Arizona. He won the battleground state of Georgia. Not so battleground back then, was surprisingly close, but ultimately went to the GOP the same way it had voted since 1992. But we can add in the states of Iowa in favor of the Democrats, Ohio, North Carolina went blue, Florida went blue, and Indiana went blue. But in this scenario, the Democrats only maintain a 56 to 44 majority. The Democratic Party had a better majority previously, but now that those conservative states, Democrats are out, that no longer matters. Keep in mind, Democrats had support. They had a senator in Nebraska. They had senators, 2 of them in West Virginia. The support for the Democratic Party was very, very wide. It covered every walk of life, which is exactly why the Democratic Party had a 60-seat majority for a very brief period of time, but in the worst case, a 59-seat majority in the United States Senate after the 2008 presidential election. But taking a look at this map, this only puts the Democrats at 56 Senate seats. The Republicans are at 44. Well, let's fast forward to 2012 when Mitt Romney won back Indiana and won back North Carolina. You know, taking a look at this Senate map, it gets even worse when we're talking about the percentage of the popular vote won versus the percentage of the electoral vote won versus the percentage of Senate seats in this map. Well, the Democrats would have 52% of the Senate seats, but the Democrats won 60% of the electoral vote. Looking at 2008, let's take a look. You know, the Democrats go up to 56% control in the United States Senate, but taking a look at the 365 electoral votes, Barack Obama won 2/3 of the entire electoral vote count, 67.8%, but only 56% of the United States Senate. But let's take a look at 2016. Let's take away Obama's victories, and let's not talk about Joe Biden's victory in this instance. Well, Barack Obama, didn't even mean to say that name, Donald Trump was able to win 306 electoral votes. That's 57% of the electorate. But this is the one time where the Republican Party is able to outperform their electoral vote count. And you'll see exactly what I mean. Iowa went to the Republican Party. They start inching up. Indiana certainly did not go to the Democrats. North Carolina went back to the GOP. Now we're tied. But there are still more states to add to Donald Trump's column. Florida goes in favor of the GOP. Ohio goes in favor of the GOP. Pennsylvania flipped. Michigan flipped. Wisconsin flipped. Where does this put us? At 60 seats for the GOP. Despite Barack Obama outperforming Trump twice in the popular vote and in the electoral vote count, the Republicans considerably outperform him both times. Joe Biden's election performance with the same amount of electoral votes brings the Democrats to just 50 seats. 50 versus 60, there's a huge difference. 60 would be filibuster-proof. 50 means you can do absolutely nothing. Looking at the Senate map, this is why the GOP has had that advantage. Because even when Democrats win, they lose. Even when Democrats are able to flip a number of states, that's the bare minimum needed to win Senate control. What the GOP can rely on is seats in Idaho, Wyoming, North and South Dakota. Cumulatively, don't even surpass Virginia in electoral vote count. Don't even surpass, Virginia. Actually, I think they tie it. But I mean, other than that, what are we seeing? Barely any numbers. I mean, if you combine the North, South Dakota, Wyoming Senate seats, that's 6 Senate seats in total. 6 Senate seats in total. You add Montana, that's 12 Senate seats. Looking at the combined electoral vote count in that instance, what that would bring us is to actually less than Virginia. I guess I shouldn't have said Idaho in that situation. But the fact that's even possible goes to show that the Senate was built and is working as intended to benefit smaller states. But that's why the GOP has had control. That's why you always see people discuss why the Senate is important, because it helps smaller states have a voice. But the problem for the Democratic Party is that their support is not as wide-ranged as it has been previously. But it also questions how democratic this system is. Yes, we have a system to benefit small states, but is this too much power for small states, is the question being raised by some Democratic officials. Is the Senate truly a representation of democracy if the same candidates can win the same amount of electoral votes and one wins a supermajority and the other wins barely a majority through their vice president, the smallest majority known to American history? It's insane to think about that these systems, work so often together Now, looking at the presidential map, comparing it to the overall results, the reason why the Democrats maintain their competitive nature on the Senate map is because they have red state Democrats. They have Trump state Democrats. They have, a number of areas that they previously were competitive in or are competitive in now that are traditionally GOP, but they could potentially win in the future. And I want to take a look at the 2014 Senate majority for the Democratic Party to highlight this point even more. The main takeaway is not that the Senate needs to be abolished, that the Senate is a fundamentally flawed system, just that the Republican Party has this power. They have this support for a reason. They have this majority, which so often seems like they shouldn't be winning it because of the popular vote margin or because of the time period. We can take a look at 2018, which is a perfect example of that. But that's the main takeaway, is that this Senate map in 2014 was the last time the Democratic Party maintained control. The purple states are states with 1 Republican and 1 Democrat. The blue states are states with 2 Democrats, and the red states are states with 2 Republicans. This looks a lot different than our presidential map. Up across Abe Lincoln and going off to the eastern side of the United States, the Democratic Party had a lot of control. The Democrats had 2 Senate seats in West Virginia. They had 1 senator of the Democratic Party in Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Indiana, states with now 2 Republicans in both of the Senate seats. Looking at Iowa, Ohio, 2 states now with Iowa with 2 Republicans, Ohio remaining the same way. But looking at, these states, looking across the 2014 map, a lot of them have gone away from the Democratic Party holding Senate seats there. North and South Dakota now have 2 Republicans. Alaska currently holds 2 Republicans. I mean, taking a look at the Senate map, it's very different than what we previously had. Montana now has a Republican. West Virginia now has a Republican. North Carolina no longer has a Democrat. Florida no longer has a Democrat. And while Democrats have made up the margin by carrying Georgia, by carrying Arizona, now 2 senators from the Democratic Party in Arizona, 2 senators from the Democratic Party in Georgia, think about what needed to be done in order for that to happen. These were flips, not givens. It's the exact opposite for the Republican Party. They can win 42% of the electoral vote count and maintain a 50-seat delegation in the United States Senate. All they need to do is retain the bare minimum. Joe Biden flipped 5 states, won the popular vote by 5%, carried the Democrats across to victory, maybe not by a lot, but certainly a trifecta. But what did it take? Hundreds of millions of dollars funneled into Georgia, hundreds of millions of dollars funneled into a number of other Senate races that fundamentally, came down to the wire. But Republicans are relaxing. If they had won the majority, the Republicans won the majority in 2020, it would have been over in 2022 for the Democratic Party. The Democrats are considering, they could lose control in 2022. But looking at, what would happen if the Biden administration was unable to do anything, well, we would have seen a bloodbath in 2022. Absolutely. But the GOP has just had this advantage for such a long period of time. This is 2014. This is 2020. A lot less purple. All of that purple indicates Democrats had reach down from Louisiana all the way up to North Dakota. Now what do we see? Almost an exact replication of what we see on the presidential map. The only difference is Montana with John Tester, Joe Manchin with, or West Virginia with Joe Manchin, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, Susan Collins in Maine. What is that? A handful of senators you could count on both hands? What does that bring us to? That is very different than what we saw in 2014. What was different about the 2012 map in 2014? 1 Republican in Nevada, a Democrat in North Dakota, a Democrat in South Dakota, a Democrat in Missouri, a Democrat in Arkansas, a Democrat in Louisiana, a Democrat in Indiana, a Democrat in North Carolina, a Republican in Maine, a Democrat in New Hampshire. Looking at those results, 2 Democrats in West Virginia, 2 Democrats in Montana, 1 Republican in Illinois, 1 Republican in Wisconsin. Looking at this map, there are so many crossover seats where the Democratic Party, came up on the upper hand because there were way more Republican seats that had crossover than there were Democratic states with crossover Republican support. But the main takeaway is we are much more partisan as a country And that has fundamentally hurt the Democratic Party because these small states, North and South Dakota, where the Democrats previously had control or some type of control, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, all smaller than my home state in Maryland in terms of electoral representation, equal it in terms of Senate representation. And I get it. That is how the system is supposed to work. But it overwhelmingly benefits the Republican Party, even if that's how the system is supposed to work. It gives small states voices for a reason, but that's exactly why the Democratic Party has had so much trouble. 2016 versus 2020 seems dramatically different, but the electoral vote count remains the same. And the thing about this Senate map is it didn't even take Donald Trump winning the popular vote for this to happen. Donald Trump barely won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, but he decimated Hillary in Ohio, in Iowa. He flipped Florida. Looking at these states, looking at 2016 versus 2020, despite winning the same amount of electoral votes and one candidate doing significantly better in the popular vote, that candidate still comes up short in the Senate map. Requires the vice president to break the tie, where this 60-seat majority could have 10 Republicans defect, and Mike Pence would be there to save the day. 10. The Democrats can't even afford 1. Very, very different Senate maps with very different scenarios. Even in Barack Obama's landslide in 2008, winning 2/3 of all of the winnable electoral votes. Where does that bring us? 56. Where does that bring us? 56 in terms of Senate seats. You combine the 2020 map, that's when you start to reach the 60 seats, but it couldn't have been done in 2008. It couldn't have been done in 2012. It certainly wasn't done in 2016. The Senate always favors the GOP. Also, let's take a look at the popular vote over the past few years. In 2016, the Democrats won the popular vote by 11 percentage points. In 2018, they won the popular vote by 20 percentage points. In 2020, the Democratic Party lost the popular vote but gained seats. And that also, goes to show that the Senate map doesn't always reflect the popular vote. But the main point is, Democrats can win the popular vote by 20 percentage points and lose seats. The Republicans can win it by 2 percentage points and lose seats, but lose one more seat than they did when they lost the popular vote by 20%. Overall, the Senate map has always benefited the GOP. Always. Looking at 2018, what happened was a realignment where these conservative Democrats were thrown out. Heidi Heitkamp, gone. Joe Donnelly, gone. Claire McCaskill, gone. Bill Nelson, gone. Why? Because Donald Trump won these states and they became too Republican for Democrats to win. So those 4 Senate seats the Democrats had relied on in the past, that would have relied on if they had won these Senate seats, lost, which meant the Democratic Party was able to effectively, lose seats and no longer have support across these regions. The Democrats simply can't win the majority based off of liberal states. They won it in 2020 by reaching into previously Republican states, or still very much purple states. But all the GOP needs to rely on are states that are pretty solid for them. States that are pretty solid for the GOP. Because if we characterize the states that were won, by more than 5 points for the GOP, they honestly wouldn't be too worried. States won by more than 5 percentage points, and they're able to just make it competitive in the rest of them. At the end of the day, once we start to see this full realignment take into effect, once John Tester is out, once Joe Manchin is out, these states will revert back to their very Republican history, and Democrats will need to make inroads elsewhere. They will need to be able to win states, because if 2024 is a closer election year and Republicans are able to win more electoral votes than they did in 2020, ultimately the Senate map will look a lot worse. But in order for Democrats to even match, winning 57% of the electoral vote on the Senate map, the Democratic Party would need to win 70 to 75% of the electoral votes just to even reach that in terms of the states that they're winning. And that's the unfortunate reality for the Democratic Party. The Senate will always benefit the GOP, which is why it's so difficult for them to win Senate control. And moving forward ahead, while Democrats obviously do not want to be in the minority, looking at the 2022 Senate map, it still poses a significant challenge. Because not only that, but if it is a red wave year, they can try to win states like Ohio and Iowa, but probably won't. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin will probably be the most hard fought. But Republicans could win back Nevada and Arizona and Georgia despite not winning them in 2020. But the reason that Donald Trump was able to absolutely, run it up the numbers in Iowa and Ohio makes it all more difficult for the Democrats to win there. We're talking about the Democrats trying to compete in territory that was won by 8 points, where the Democrats won by less than a percentage point in Arizona and by 2 points in Nevada. Because a lot of the states the Democratic Party won were competitive, that's impressive on the presidential margin, but it doesn't always translate to two Democratic victories on the Senate level. It doesn't always. But for the Republicans, it almost always does. Whenever they win states, they're able to, run up the numbers. As years go on, we saw a complete separation of these states from the Democratic Party. North and South Dakota used to have 2 Democratic representatives. Now they have 2 Republicans. Taking a look across the country, the Democratic Party has lost support in conservative states, possibly because the country has moved away from being super, bipartisan in certain aspects where you could see someone vote for Trump and also vote for a Democrat. There are exceptions, North Carolina being one in 2020. But outside of that, we don't see anything, fundamentally similar to what we saw back in 2014. Looking at the 2014 Senate election results, this was the beginning of the realignment. This was the beginning of the states becoming too conservative for Democrats. 2016 did it again. 2018 did it again. And now this is our Senate map. It mimics almost exactly what we see on the presidential map. Almost exactly what we see. But that's not good for Democrats. Because if we're seeing exactly what we see on the presidential map and they're only at 50 with a 5-point margin of victory on the popular vote and, a very large performance in the electoral vote, 57%, and they're still cracking 50, they still need the vice president to enter in the chamber and break the tie. Yeah, that's not a good look for the Democratic Party moving forward, because they are going to have to do a lot more than the GOP to win the majority, and that's the unfortunate reality for Democrats. It's going to be very difficult to win the Senate moving forward for a reason, because the system technically does work, but for decades now, it has only benefited the Republican Party. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.